Today I'm exploring one of the smallest countries in Africa called Burundi. It's to the south of Rwanda. Rwanda, of course, been in the news in Ireland a bit with this Rwanda plan that the UK have to send to deport people to Rwanda. But Burundi is a country I hadn't actually heard of before. And again, I'm kind of going on a trend of just choosing countries I've never heard of before and making videos on them. Um, we have a country that is landlocked in the middle of Africa, one of the poorer countries of this world, probably one of the poorest, and quite a difficult situation there with floods lately. I looked at some news articles going on about different problems there in general. It's a very subsistent economy, basically subsistence farming, and a lot of that has been disrupted by flooding and by violence. There's also violence surrounding Burundi, especially in the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the west of it. There are some interesting and nice things as well. We're going to go through a couple of these tabs and show you some of the more interesting things that I have seen. It's also part of the Great Rift Valley as well. I kind of mentioned that in my Kenya video, this kind of network of tectonic plates and mountains that kind of move together to create this interesting valley structure. We will see some of the rifts in the actual mountains. So you can kind of see the shape of it though, these long lines going from the north down to the southeast, southwest kind of, yeah, different shapes there as well. Okay, we'll go through some of the different news things first. When you type in Burundi news, different weird things. Burundi records first 3 cases of monkeypox, which is quite a bad issue as well. Burundi appeals for aid as rains and floods displace 100,000 people. That was in April. Here, authorities relocate families displaced by widespread flooding. And then also different human rights issues, a journalist facing possible life sentence, stuff about the leader talking about stoning people as well, loads of weird stuff. But yeah, that's just the news articles that I see when I type it into a Google browser. Wanted to just mention those. The actual Wikipedia is quite interesting. Burundi, officially the Republic of Burundi, is a landlocked country in the Great Rift Valley, as I just mentioned, at the junction between the African Great Lakes region and Southeast Africa, bordered by Rwanda. Yeah, kind of mentioned that already. They are having a coastline with a very large lake. This large lake here, which is quite a cool lake. The second oldest freshwater lake in the world, which is pretty interesting. The second largest by volume, and the second deepest. Uh, that's just actually quite an interesting fact. Um, Before, I suppose, people from Europe came to that region, there was the Twa, the Hutu, and the Tutsi people who lived there for at least 500 years, obviously a lot longer than that. For more than 200 years of those, Burundi was an independent kingdom. In 1885, it became part of the German colony of German East Africa after World War One. I think it became part of the Belgian combined territory of Rwanda, Urundi. After the Second World War, it was transferred to a United Nations Trust territory. Then eventually they gained independence in 1962. There was coups and basically a whole messy history since then. There was a genocide against the Hutus. And then eventually one of them became president, the first Hutu president, but he died after, I think, 3 months. He was assassinated. There was more coups and more civil wars and loads of mess. Basically now lately they have an authoritarian regime with a pure human rights record, according to Wikipedia here. Burundi remains primarily a rural society, with just 30% of people living in urban areas, very densely populated. Many young people emigrate to other places to find work. Yeah, so on and so forth. I probably won't go through all of this stuff. I want to show you more of the actual maps. The least happiest country, according to the Happiest Report in 2018, which is a pity, I suppose. Faces poverty, corruption, instability, poor literacy rates as well. Going to mention those things at the start of the video. Now we move on to more interesting, nicer things, I suppose. There's this, nicer, I don't know. You may have heard of Livingstone and Stanley, the famous explorer Livingstone, of course, who explored a lot of Africa. He was a British explorer, if I remember correctly. And there's this interesting rock where they've actually scripted their names into the rock. If you look at this, I believe they scripted their names, unless someone else did it. But here we go, Livingstone Stanley, 1871. And according to some people in the locality, this is where the famous words "Dr. Livingstone," I presume, were uttered by Stanley. But then, this article goes on about the way actually that wasn't the case; it was somewhere else. But all the same, it's quite an interesting landmark. And I do have it kind of, I think, located here on the Mugir River, which is an interesting river. A lot of the rivers are very small, relatively compared to other countries. They aren't as big, and they don't provide as much hydropower. Even though hydropower is like the biggest source of electricity in general in Burundi, the rivers aren't very big and the hydro stations are not very big. This is one of the rivers anyway, and on this river we have what I believe, I think I had it open. Oh, that's a pity. I had it open somewhere, the actual location of that particular rock. Um, yeah, it's somewhere around here. You couldn't really see it that well. I think it was actually here. It was basically a place like this with all these little houses around it, and there was some sort of rock, and they said, yeah, that's where that rock is, and where they were supposed to have met all those years ago. The very famous story. I think that's it there, actually. Yeah, I think I dropped a pin there. Livingstone Stanley Monument. There's a big rock with the writing on it. Cool. Thought that was interesting and worth mentioning. Yeah, when we consider the subsistence farming, we can kind of see that a lot of that here. This I thought was curious. You got very let's call it organized straight lines, and then you got these random fields with not organized lines in them at all. So like, why bother have it organized in the first place? I guess these roads provide good access to it, but then like, why not keep it organized? I thought that was a little bit funny. Just a inconsistency, I suppose. We can close that tab. Yeah, close this tab as well. I think this was, yeah, okay, that was actually the monument there. Close that. This was interesting. This is a hydro plant. We go on to the hydro and the electricity. There's very little actual industry in the whole country. So hydro is enough to actually power most of the country's energy needs. They still import a small bit. We go to energy in Burundi. The country produces locally 70-ish% of the electricity it consumes, with the rest imported from other countries. The most important source is hydro, representing 95% of total production. Again, the poorer a country is, the more likely hydro will be enough to power the entire country, because you're not using a lot of electricity in general. So like when Ireland got its hydro dam in 1921, thereabouts in Ireland and Russia, that was enough to power the country. Of course, not anymore, not the case anymore, because Ireland's become much more developed. But in a small country with not much development, this kind of a number can appear. And this here is the site of a hydro dam that's now been built. This is actually an old map, so you can't see that hydro dam on this map. I'll show you one in a minute. Just I wanted to keep this tab open because you can see here farmers are burning the land to clear it. It's a fire there and smoke. You can see the blackened land around it. Just wanted to show that. Of course, that's quite a common technique used in most countries, but it's interesting to see it captured on a map. And this is how wildfires also begin, and wildfires that kill people as well if they're not controlled. These what are normally quite controlled events of burning the ground to prepare it for pasture land or whatever. If we go to this one here, this is the hydro dam that is being developed. Not the most biggest, this is the Kibu 116, 20 megawatts. Yeah, so they're just not very big compared to the big international ones that I've been exploring in my videos. But they've got lots of these small ones. They even got like one that's 1.5, I think one is 0.3. Look at that one, 2018. They're just very small hydro dams and hydropower stations, but they're enough to do enough for the country for its limited capacity as it is. You can kind of see the infrastructure here. Quite a lot has gone into this. That's the river there. Again, the river isn't very big. It's not a very big river relative to the bigger ones we've seen in other videos. Yeah, wanted just to highlight that. You can clearly see here that this is the same area, but nothing has actually been developed yet. It's right there where all the development has taken place. Okay, I'm going to close that tab. This is a gold mine. Want to just point out there are also a few mines, but there really is very, very, very little of any kind of mining or bigger organized industrial activity in the country, but that is one of them. What there is, however, is tea and coffee. We can skip to the tea and coffee because I thought that was quite interesting to see. This is a tea factory. This is a bit like in China somewhere, the intense green. This is a tea factory, a big building. This is kind of one of the only, kind of more industrial sectors. Look at the intense green. I'm assuming these are all tea plants. I haven't gone down and checked myself, but yeah, they probably are. You can see that monoculture. Nothing else is growing there. Very nice fields, very maintained and organized, and not much biodiversity, but certainly good production. You can see how extreme the difference is in the subsistence farming landscape and in the actual more developed situation on the left side here. Thought that was worth showing. Also here, this is meant to be a coffee farm. Now, I don't know enough about coffee to say this is the only coffee plantation area, these couple of fields, or do these fields also count into that? This looks more like pasture land, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to make that assumption. But I'm guessing this is the coffee part. Wanted to show that as well. We're going to jump through a few different things. This is something random that I saw. I don't know what this is. Again, it reminds me of palm trees, but I'm not really sure. I couldn't actually get any more details on this. I wanted just to highlight this. And by the way, thank you to the person who told me about the tanks in the Brunei video, that they're meant to be for fishing / shrimp production. So I've actually been able to use YouTube as a forum to answer a question that I had. So thank you very much for that. Equally, if anybody knows the answer to this, that would be cool. I don't know what these are. Interesting little areas of fields. I was actually following this road because I was just exploring the interior of the country in general. And when I followed this road back, I came to these like massive green areas here. This red area also interested me. This kind of red soil. So you see the different soil types that are present. I think I followed the road further back this way. I actually initially thought this was a railway because it's so smooth, the actual curves in the road. But I do believe it's actually a highway and not a railway for some reason. It's something that I came across. This red area also kind of intrigued me, and these big long lines of, yeah, kind of farmland, I guess, as well, producing stuff. To the slight east here, we have again a large production area of sugar. I think sugar is being produced around here. I think that's what came up when I googled in sugar in Burundi. Yeah, again, more productive land areas here in general. And then you get this kind of close to the border. I think it's with Tanzania. Who's over here? What country is this? Come on, tell me. It's Tanzania. Okay, much bigger country. You get this kind of green belt right here, which I thought was also quite interesting. And there's a lot of this kind of marshy land. If we go more to the north again, yeah, this is the Rift Valley stuff, in my opinion. Wanted to quickly highlight that, but I'm actually more interested in this area here. Very interesting marshy area. So you have like what is a lake. It's definitely a lake, but it turns into this very much marshland. That could be reeds growing or whatever. And that kind of continues until we turn to these kind of what I would consider to be paddy fields normally. It kind of reminds me of paddy fields for growing rice. So it's like wet enough land, kind of boggy, but still kind of part of this very wet area. There's a very clear distinction in what is the shore and what is the wet part. And this shore area is cool too. Look at that. That's a perfect circle. That was quite fascinating. So you get these weird shapes in the Rift Valley, I suppose. That is a very, very distinct circle. When I zoomed out a little bit more, what I thought I saw was a hydro kind of area because all these water areas are being backed up right into the yeah, into the elevations. And this is the border, I think, with Rwanda already. So I couldn't actually continue exploring to see where that water was blocking and keep it in Burundi. But I did go further up, but I did see this kind of barrier here. Again, very interesting landscape. You got these what looks like agricultural swampy fields. Yeah, I thought that was just a curious thing. That would be interesting to see in person, just to kind of explore that more deeply. On this, again, this is Rwanda, but if you turn off the map, oh yeah, you can kind of see it there. This is a weird kind of a building here. I thought that was a bit strange, like a checkpoint on this causeway, going over that damp area. Okay, as for the capital city, this is the official capital, I believe, Gitega. Not much to see there, just an airport. On the airport, no, there wasn't really much to see. There was an airport in what used to be the capital over here to the east that had an interesting little feature. I'm not sure how scientifically correct this is, but this reminds me of a turning roundabout for airplanes, maybe. The airplane can drive as far as here, turn around, and go back up again to the runway. Yeah, probably not the case because this infrastructure is blocking it, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it's probably just some sort of lights or communication tower or radar that are attached to this round thing. It's just a random thought that came to my head. The capital itself, there was some interesting things along the shoreline. There was this interesting development here. So you got kind of what are, I believe, are houses, funny square houses, and this kind of coastal development here. Thought that looked kind of cool. Yeah, not really sure what it is. And then there was this funny house over here, kind of a funny pattern. I thought that was also noteworthy. There isn't really much to see here in terms of economy. I'm just looking more at the architecture and things like that look interesting for maps. Okay, I think we can close most of these tabs now and go back to the economy tab just to kind of highlight how little there actually is there. I think it's done a pretty good job just going through the different parts of the country. There isn't really that much to see on the agricultural side. Look at this intense red again that I showed you earlier on. This is on the app Google Maps, much more red and intense, and again, those green areas. Okay, I'm also going to close these tabs, save the computer a bit of energy. And this is the power hydro. That's the energy one. Okay, let's go into the economy. Half the population underneath the poverty line, at least 53%. That's in 2010. And now we've had more flooding, so probably worse. Look at what was being produced. Don't know what cassava is. Interesting plant. Okay, that's interesting. I need to explore that more. 1.6 million tons of banana. So probably some of those fields that we saw were probably banana. Sweet potato, vegetables, beans, rice, maize, sugarcane, palm oil. Interesting. Yeah, and various rices. So we did see some of the paddy fields, I believe, for that rice. We look at what's actually been exported: coffee, tea, sugar, cotton, hides, and all those other things that we just saw. Germany is a big connection there. That's interesting. I think Germany's interesting because yeah, we saw that they used to have a German connection there with the former colony. Pakistan, Kenya, China, Sweden, Belgium, Canada, Rwanda, United States. Such a mixed variation of countries. Maybe because the exportation and the economy is so small, that's why you get this kind of this proportionate, yeah, export setup. I find it very interesting. I see such a weird mix of countries in there. Probably the coffee and tea going to different parts of the world. That's probably what it is. For import goods, we're looking at petroleum products from Saudi Arabia, capital goods, consumer products from China. And then it's your neighbor Uganda, well, relative neighbor, Belgium, Kenya, Zambia, India, and the UAE. Um, yeah, nothing else really crazy to see there. Yeah, it used to be possible for it to be self-sufficient in food, but yeah, civil unrest, overpopulation, soil erosion have contributed to contraction of the subsistence economy by 25%, just relatively large. Lots of internally displaced people have been unable to produce their own food, and of course the floods are not helping with that as well. Yeah, overall that's a little bit of a bleak picture. We go to this fragility index, pretty fragile, 24th most fragile country in the world, behind its neighbor. It's 46 in Rwanda. Its next door neighbor, the Congo, is much more fragile, and it's the war there that, of course, also affects its direct neighbors. I think Burundi even closed its border to Rwanda, calling it a bad neighbor due to some sort of connection to the Congo conflict. Energy, basically non-existent in Burundi. We have a little bit of the hydro production, and they consume all of that. They consume some oil products as well. Nothing on electricity. In terms of freedom, 14 not free due to that kind of, yeah, that very strict regime. Inflation numbers, relatively high. Well, relatively high. 12% isn't good. We go to max there. Yeah, they had a peak of, was that 30% in May of last year? Kind of going back under control again gradually. Yeah, I didn't have any other mad data. Just wanted to again show here the amount of conflict in the region. That's Burundi there, where the mouse is. There you have the Congo. Then you got South Sudan conflict, you got Ethiopian conflict, and you've got, is that Somalia? Yeah. So basically, there's loads of violence going on in that region. So it's difficult to kind of get ahead when there's so many things holding you back for a country in general in that sense. And of course, climate change isn't going to be good for the farming. The subsistence farmers are ones who are at most risk because if their crop fails, they've got nothing left to kind of buy in other goods. So that's why aid's very important for places like Burundi, I can imagine. Yeah, but if we were to ignore all of that and look at it just as a country from a beauty point of view, it is a very beautiful place. I mean, to have that massive lake frontage as well is quite a nice thing.